benchmarking. It's more than just a bunch of numbers, presented by Teena Shouse. Next slide, please. Everyone has been muted for audio quality. If you do have any questions, please save them until the end when we go over them during the Q&A portion of the webinar. Next slide. I do want to let everyone know I am your moderator, Joshua Amos, and Teena Shouse will be presenting. Next slide. And again, Q&A portion at the end. And I do want to encourage everyone to take the survey at the end of the webinar. When you exit, it will come up. The board eagerly awaits the responses and your feedback just to make sure that they are providing quality services to you. Next slide, please. Okay, the FMCC has many services to the FM community, such as Ask the Expert, Find a Consultant, Locate a Speaker, and online educational resources. You may find more at their website, fmcc.ifma.org. Next slide. And we would also like to take the time to thank our webinar sponsors. Next slide. Next slide. And that brings us to why you're here today. Teena Shouse, who is our presenter, as many of you know, is the past chairman of IFMA and Global FM. She's been in FM for almost 30 years. And I will go ahead and turn it over to her. Teena?
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are listening to my voice. Thank you for taking out the time to talk about benchmarking and data management and what that means. I can't see your faces, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, but I know that, how many of you are truly overwhelmed by all the data that's around you? I can imagine, I'm kind of acknowledging that there's nodding heads going on out there in the cyberspace. But I think what we're going to talk about today is, while data is more abundant than ever before, it also seems to be a struggle to make data and information in general meaningful. And also, we live in a very competitive world, and people want to know where they stand. They want to jump, and sometimes I, even as a consultant, will get people to want to jump directly to benchmarking and say, I want to benchmark, I want to benchmark, I want to know where I stand, instead of truly understanding, what data is important and what should I measure, and then not only what should I measure, but then what do I do with that information when I get it. So that's what this session is all about. So we're going to talk a little bit about, how to better understand how to use data in decision making. And you'll hear me use the term data-driven decisions quite frequently. Many times, especially facility managers are asked to verify. It's that whole trust but verify thing that you have going on with management. And so using data effectively can really help you in making better decisions, but can also help and your clients and or your managers, really helping them make better decisions and leading them in the direction that you want them to go. It also allows you to ask the right questions as to when you're choosing services or you're choosing products. Now, if you're a consultant and you're listening to my voice, you want to use data to convince a client that you're the right choice for them. If you're a facility manager, you're wanting to make sure that you have the right information and you're asking the right questions so that you choose the right HVAC system, you choose the right consultant, you choose the right food service operator, whatever it may be. It also will allow you to better communicate your accomplishments, and I'm going to talk extensively about that. In the years that I've been in the FM industry, more and more it becomes the common theme of, how do I communicate what I do? How do I let other people know the value that I bring to the organization? And that seems to be a fundamental, universal issue across almost every country I've ever spoken in, every city I've ever been in. And so also using benchmark data sometimes can really help you do that better. But you have to start with finding out what is the right data in the first place. So how do you select the right KPIs which make sense for your organization? I'm a bit of an FM geek, and I work with some wonderful FM geeks, and it's almost a contest to see how many KPIs we can actually collect. But on the other hand, it's not just about how many KPIs you have or how many KPIs you're measuring and how you're gathering that, but really what are you doing with that? How do we interpret all of these numbers into logical and useful information? Because ultimately we want it to really increase our performance. So what we have to do is we have to dig through all this data and decide what is important and practically apply that data to our businesses. Because in the end of the day, that's how we tell our story. That's how we share the experiences and show, show me that we still have difficulty telling this story. How did I help this client? How did I change the productivity factors of my facility? I've encouraged my students and people that I've spoken to over the years to help them to use data to be seen as what I call productivity enablers. And all of a sudden when you say that, they kind of step back for a moment and they get this kind of surprised look on their face and they say, what do you mean? And I said, really, if somebody asks you, what do you do? And you say, I'm a facility manager or I'm a facility management consultant. What does that really mean? I mean, I got to tell you, at a dinner party, it doesn't exactly stop the conversation. What does stop the conversation? Because then they're going, really, what is that? And I say, I enable productivity. I also call myself a solution architect. And what I mean by that is we create solutions. Whether you're a consultant or whether you're an FMer, every single day you create solutions for the people you work with. And wouldn't it be great if you could be looked at as a productivity enabler or a solution architect rather than just a cost of doing business? As soon as you achieve that paradigm shift, that's truly when you'll be on the road to greater success. But before we get started, I want to make sure that we have kind of level setting some basic definitions. Big data. So what is big data? It's really funny. Throughout any industry, there gets to be the buzzwords, and everybody's talking about it. But in all honesty, a lot of people don't know what it is. It's kind of a sexy, fun new name of what it is we do. We gather, we have all this big data. Well, pretty much it's just a lot of complex data that we pull together from a lot of sources. And I'm going to go into that in more detail here in a moment. And KPIs, key performance indicators. They're critical methods or metrics that can be measured against to determine the success of the core processes. It's that simple. Balanced Scorecard. More and more people are using Balanced Scorecards. I had the privilege of being on the board of directors for IFMA when we instituted the Balanced Scorecard back in 2008 or 2009. And since then, it has really re-engineered the way that IFMA does its business. Since then, I've spoken and worked with several other companies to do the same thing. Balanced Scorecard is a wonderful, wonderful tool that really aligns and monitors performance that compares, it really compares what it is you're doing to your initiatives to get it, what you want to get done, to the initiatives that you're going to have to do to get it done, and then monitors and measures your progress. And then, of course, there's benchmarking, which is simply the comparison of metrics against the targets. And, it's interesting. Throughout my career, when I was the facility director for Sprint for 18 years, I joined the Corporate Headquarters Council. And we benchmarked with other corporate headquarters. And, I just want to put out a warning out there. It's really, really important that whoever you choose to benchmark with, you make sure that it truly is someone that they might be a corporate headquarters, but they might still be as different as apples and oranges. The other thing that I want to state here is sometimes people need to start benchmarking against themselves. They need to find their baseline and then benchmark improvements against themselves first before they go out and find somebody on the outside. So, gathering the data. How do we get this quote big data? How does it come about? Well, there's a lot of ways. It comes from surveys. It can come from databases. It can come from customer sat surveys. It comes from work orders. It comes from CMMS reports. So your job begins by basically gathering the data from all these countless resources, and then you need to prioritize what data is really important to gather, to analyze, to manage, and then eventually benchmark instead of jumping right into the deep end of the pool. I highly encourage that people only measure what you need to manage your facilities, to manage the projects. I call this the data-driven decision-making because it allows you the freedom of taking the guesswork out of the situation, basically. So all these information sources, there's another really great source of information for making data-driven decisions is from your staff. You can get utility companies. There's the Energy Star. That might be a source of information for you to gather so that you can gather your performance as far as energy usage. From your vendors, from your service partners, they're another wonderful resource that you can gather information and figure out whether or not you want to actually measure it. This is what I call the Afm Software. It's kind of an alphabet soup, if you will. These are all of the different places where data resides that you might want to go to in order to gather the right information to manage your facilities or to manage your project the best. So it's everything from the CMMS to the BAS to an integrated work management system. And I'll go into a couple of these a little bit in a little bit more detail here in a moment. So here's a wonderful opportunity. One of the things that's really important when we start talking about data and benchmarking is making sure that we're speaking the same language. And I'm not going to go into COBE, but it is something that I would highly recommend that you check out, because COBE is what was basically developed so that there could be a standard method to exchange information between systems, which would eventually drive the cost down. Because construction operations, you know, there was this gap between how the data was actually labeled and connected, and so that's just, like I said, this is, we could go on and talk about COBE for another 2 hours, but it's just something that I want you to put in your pocket and do some more research on as a possible data point. What is included in COBE? A great deal of information. It's everything from your contact information, your room numbers, your preventative maintenance procedures, how the building was closed out, your O&M manuals. This is all data that if you don't get this data correct at the very beginning, and your inventories are correct from the very beginning of a project or the very beginning of building a new building, recommissioning a building, whatever it is, remodeling, whatever. If you don't get all of this information correct, and if you don't have a good inventory, it's going to be really difficult to do some of the other things that we're going to talk about as being able to measure. Because if you don't have a good inventory, if you don't know how many square feet you have, if you don't know how many air handlers you have, if you don't know how many people are really sitting in the seats, the occupancy, you're not going to be able to have the information. BIM, again, we could do a whole other seminar on BIM, but for those of you who are not familiar with BIM, I think it's something that bears some investigation. BIM is definitely coming straight at you. If you've not done a project with BIM, you probably will within the next year. It here again is a huge, huge amount of data. But here again, when we get down to facility management, what are the responsibilities of the FM team when it comes to BIM, and how can BIM be connected to the CMMS systems or the IWMS systems? Not something we're going to solve today, but it is something that I want you to put on your to-do list and challenge you to become more familiar with BIM and be ready, because that is definitely something that's going to be coming forward. So why harvest the data anyway? Well, it's to be more productive. It's to be more effective. Let's take, for instance, Apple. Apple is considered to be one of the more innovative computer companies. But you know what? They all have the same resources. What makes them different? What makes them more progressive? What makes them more productive? What makes them more effective? Well, you know, they start looking at why. They start from what we call the golden circle of the why, the how, and the what. Everybody knows what they do. Some know how they do it, but few people really know why they do it, okay? Making a profit is not always the answer. What I'd like for you to do when you start thinking about building this process is to say, what is the purpose? You know, why do I get out of bed in the morning? Why do I do what I do? And then how does this data fit in to, you know, inspiring, you know, somebody looking at a situation differently, looking at the inside, you know, from the inside out. Interpreting data. Here again, what do we do with all this data after it's been gathered? What's important to my organization? What's important to one of you is not possibly going to be important to the next person. You know, is selecting your KPIs, your key performance indicators. I'm going to give you a list of what I've considered to be some very important KPIs, but then again, they might not be something that would be meaningful for your organization. You're the only one that needs to know. And like someone once told me, what's important to my boss is what's important to me. So I wouldn't go off on a tangent and just say, okay, these are the KPIs, because if that's not what's important to the management and the people that you're going to actually be reporting these to, then you've done a lot of hard work for nothing. And then follow your strategic plan, because there needs to be a plan. There needs to be a purpose in gathering all of this data and figuring out the next steps. So first of all, you have to say, how is the money spent? If you can say yes to the gathering, it'll help you determine how was the money spent. It would determine whether or not it's in alignment with the strategic goals. Okay? Did it improve the operation of the buildings or the organization? So if you can say yes to that data gathering side of those questions, that'll help you in making better decisions. BAS, here again, decide whether something, we talked a little bit about KPIs, making sure that something is truly a measurement versus a metric. And I just use this as an example of, for instance, a metric for a measurement for BAS is the value read versus the metric is the unit of measure that can be used to measure or access performance. So make sure that when you're looking at what your data you are measuring that you want to benchmark, is it truly a measurement or is it a metric? So you might want to go back to the slide and noodle that one for a minute. So the value of the data, here again, to support quick, compelling decisions. It also allows you to communicate the past accomplishments. So in other words, what did we do last year? We reduced our energy consumption. We improved our occupancy rate, or occupancy per square foot. We reduced downtime of our data center. Whatever that means, whatever organizational impact you had, you demonstrated success. But it also gives you the future opportunity to figure out, how do I make an impact? All right. So there's two questions. How does your organization make decisions? Right now, I want to just hit the pause button for 1 second and just really think about that and have you mentally, and I wish we were together because I would ask you to raise your hand and ask you to tell me, how does your organization make decisions? Sometimes we make decisions and we work so hard and so fast that we never really sit down and be quiet, hit the pause button, and ask ourselves that question. How do you measure success? That's what benchmarking can lead you to, is you can truly measure your success. It's really difficult to walk into your quarterly reviews without some sort of validation that says, yes, I have been successful this year. Yes, we had a great year. Really? Well, Give me something that shows me that. So you have to decide how you want to demonstrate how you measure success. I'm going to give you a moment to read this to yourself.
Teena, your audio cut out.
Uh-oh.
There you are. Now I can hear you.
Is it back?
Yes,
okay.
You're back.
All right, perfect. So, you know, everybody's talking about it. They're talking about the fact that people want to collect and report all of this data, but it's really, really important to make sure that it's clear about your objectives and the strategic direction you're going to take that. It's like having meaningful KPIs. What does that really mean? Well, it means that you get executive support when you're creating your mission, your vision, your values, and that those KPIs are supporting the vision, the mission, and the values. And for those of you who have not taken the time to create a separate mission, vision, and value statement that is in alignment with your organizations, I would highly encourage you to. And as consultants, if the consultants that I'm speaking to, this is something that's probably already in your bag of tricks, because this really is the genesis of how we support, how consultants support their clients. We can't take them on a journey until they've clearly identified what is their mission, what is their vision, and what are the values that they contribute, and how is that tethered to the organization that they support. This is an example of a mission statement. And, you know, sometimes people really get confused as to what's the difference between a mission and a vision. So it's kind of, and I earlier talked about building a balanced scorecard. This is actually a mission statement and a kind of a core balanced scorecard objectives that we did for MD Anderson Cancer Center. And so here, very clearly, you can see that it's the mission is to provide the facilities and operational support required to fulfill the mission. So in other words, they've tethered themselves directly to the Cancer Center. So everything that they do is to make sure that MD Anderson Cancer Center is successful. And that's, so what they will do then is take these basic objectives, and then they will create actions, and then the KPIs, and then the metrics. So it kind of drills farther down. So you go to the actual initiatives, like what you see in front of you, and then you're going to have to figure out what are your KPIs to actually to measure how proactive was your customer service program. And this is where you can say, okay, my first time I did a customer sat survey, I only got a 66. So that becomes your baseline for benchmarking to measure your success going forward. So here again, you have the objective, you have the measurement, and you have the target. So at least you have something to start with as a baseline before you actually start the act of benchmarking. This is just another example under each of the different perspectives. The other thing that I want to talk about with benchmarking and with setting the targets for your KPIs is be really, really careful to not set yourself up for failure. I have several clients who consistently will set these unrealistic goals and say, oh yeah, we can reduce energy consumption by X amount, and we can do, we can reduce our spend by such and such. And I say, can you really do that? And they say, well, no, but that's what they're expecting, so that's what I've got to put up there. And that is so scary to me, to already put in writing something that you know is unrealistic. It's much more real. It's much better to be more realistic and set your targets as something reasonable, but have them be stretch goals, and then benchmark against yourself as to how you've done against those targets. So when we talk about meaningful KPIs, what I'm talking about is making sure that there truly is focus. I have a lot of facilities that identify way too many metrics. So I want you to focus on what is essential for your success, not what's easy to measure. Okay, there's a big difference. Validity is where you evaluate and you measure the specifics. not intangibles like values, teamwork, partnerships, that sort of thing, but really focus on validating the outcomes of your activities. So what happened as a result of what you did? Connectivity uses measures that connect the managers and the leaders to their scorecards in ways that they can understand and influence. So these are the measurements that really, connect to them to the reality. And then the integration. This is where the Balanced Scorecard really has to be integrated, not only into the FM technology, but it also needs to be integrated into the organization's performance management practices. Or you know what? If it isn't, it'll never drive change. It'll never drive. You'll never be able to measure that success. This is another way of showing and selecting. This is another example of another way to do a balanced scorecard and selecting meaningful KPIs. This is a bit of an eye chart, but when you access this, and you can access this, I believe right after the webinar, it'll be available. And also, I always put mine on my website after the fact as well, and so it'll make it a lot easier to see. But it'll show you real initiatives and real KPIs. Now, these are what I call the top 10, supporting metrics. These are the things that I have chosen to help my clients. And I've said, if you're only going to start with 10, these are what I call my top, I kind of feel like David Letterman, the top 10. These are the top 10 supporting metrics. And it's the PM to DM ratio, it's compliance, it's how much rework did we do? What's our work order aging report look like? What are the top 10 problem codes? And what can I do to address those? But like I said, I think our list is up to like 154. We kind of collect them like some people collect keychains. But it's here again, start with the simple ones, start with the ones that are really going to support the business and that are going to be able to help you tell your story. For CAFM, there's some supporting metrics. Total cost of ownership is one that's very important. Space utilization rate, cost per assignable square feet. You get the picture. Every single operation has its own supporting documents or supporting metrics. So you need to look at every element that's important to you and or your clients and say, what are the metrics that are right for them? Here again, here are some BAS supporting metrics. Give you a chance to digest that for just a second. So when we talk about KPIs and benchmark and the whole technology, just to kind of summarize it, the technology is just a tool. But it's an enabler. Here again, it's an enabler that helps you get to the end. I'm a big Covey girl. I was a disciple of Covey the minute I first heard him speak, and it's interesting. Through all these years, his habits that he identified are still so valid. But my favorite one is to start with the end in mind. What do I want to? How do I want this to end up? How do I want this to? What do I want this to look like at the end of the day? And then again, I can't emphasize enough to limit the amount of data that you measure and really focus on those measurements. And then again, like I said, technology is that tool. It is not the end game. That's another thing. We do a lot of advising on CMMS, IWMS, technology tools. What's the right one? Who should I buy? What's right for me? And it's really difficult. When they say who's the best one out there? Well, there's a lot of great tools out there. But if you don't know how to use the tool and the tool is too complex or the tool is not going to give you the information and the data that you need, it doesn't matter how much it costs. It's simply just something that sits on your computer. So we really need to think about how we're going to take that tool and all of that information, and we go from the big data, we sort through that, we get our metrics, we determine what's critical, we look at our KPIs, and then we compare the data to the targets. And that's how we get to benchmarking. And then benchmarking then goes right back into the KPIs, and that's how we define the best practices, and that's how we define what's right. It's interesting, I had a conversation with a woman the other day, and she said, I really don't like the term best practices. And I've been thinking a lot about that, and I too have kind of gone in and out as to whether or not I think that is a good term. Because best according to who, and is it best for me? And so I think that you need to think bigger than just best practices. I think that you need to think of it as my most appropriate practices, or besting, or the what I want to achieve, and be better, the better practices, being better than what you are, versus trying to figure out who, you can't be an Apple if you're a hospital. So in other words, just make sure that they're realistic and make sure that the practices are appropriate for you. The utilization tools, the Balanced Scorecard. Here again, I can't emphasize enough what a great tool that can be to really take this information and link the KPIs to the strategic plan. And then that will then allow you, once you have got it all together and you've used your own tool, your own information, and you've benchmarked against yourself, you'll be able to then integrate the financial and the financial measures and show the linkage between the goals and the strategies. And then once you're comfortable with that, then you can go out and benchmark with other organizations. This is just another way of looking at the Balanced Scorecard. It's a way of looking at how do you look at your stakeholders? How do your customers see you? Can your employees continue to improve and create value? Those are some of the things that I would highly encourage you to figure out a way to measure. And then here's another one of my favorite quotes. So as you can see, other people agree, it is not just a bunch of numbers. And I think this was a particular quote where I kind of got the idea for this presentation, is it's more than just a bunch of numbers. There's so much behind it, and there's so much work that has to be done behind the scenes. And here again, like I said before, you need to understand whether you want to be an internal or external benchmarking. Do you want to measure against yourself, or do you want to measure against other organizations? And the targets. Industry standards, I've already talked about best practices and the whole philosophy behind that. But I want to talk for a moment about industry standards. There's a lot of industry standards out there. IFMA has created industry standards. BOMA has created industry standards. APA, AFE, ASHRAE. I mean, there's so many out there. And to be honest with you, and this may sound like IFMA heresy, it's not. No one has all the answers. I wish we did. But everyone looks at it from a different perspective. Of course, I'm a little prejudiced. I think IFMA's standards and benchmarking and analysis is the best. But I think you should be open to what else is out there and how other industry standards can complement what you can learn at IFMA, and make it the best, because that's also how we make IFMA a better organization, is by learning from others. And that's how we can complement each other. So the first step in benchmark, the internal benchmarking is really just the first step. It really does take years to get valid results. And that's the other thing, and I especially point this out when we start talking about customer satisfaction and customer productivity. It can take anywhere from 2 to 5 years to really get good, valid information, in my opinion, because you need to be consistent. You need to be consistent in the way that you're asking questions. If you're using customer sat surveys, you need to be consistent in the way that the KPIs that you're using, the way that you're using the measurements. So it really is continuous, and it's an ongoing process. So it's something that you need to commit to. It's something that someone needs to own. Someone, if it's properly aligned, and you can get the data from the right people, you need to have an owner. You need to have somebody who really has skin in the game and somebody that will stay with this and see this as an ongoing project. Most organizations already do it in some way, but is it really calculated? Is it really formalized? Can you take what you do and formalize it a bit more with some of the ideas that I've shared with you in this webinar? One of the really fun ways is to do a visioning session and to say, we really want to get better. And we want to start with, managing our data better and then using that data to make good decisions. And you start with a visioning session and you get a lot of different people involved. Get your boss involved, get HR involved, get procurement involved, get your customers involved and say, what are the things that are important? What would be important for you to know about us, or for what would be important for us to measure and to better manage and to be a better service for you? And do a visioning workshop and help them become a part of the process. Because believe me, if you can get them on board early, it makes the rest of it so much better, so much easier. Here's another nice bit of information about external benchmarking. I think I really like the line, what they are not doing. I think when you start comparing with other people, it really does allow you to see how other people are doing it, and not only how you compare with what you are currently doing, but also are they doing something that you should be doing. The only other interesting, from a true life experience, benchmarking when I was with the IFMA Corporate Headquarters Council had caused me to have to do a lot more root cause analysis. And for a lot of people, that's not exactly a fun thing to do, because it's one thing to know the numbers, but it's another to understand how those numbers were derived and why something is happening the way it is. And so I ended up doing a lot of root cause analysis to understand why my square footage numbers were different, or why my cost per square foot for food service subsidy or whatever was so different from other corporate headquarters. So it does cause you more work, but it is truly part of the whole process re-engineering. When you look at external benchmarking, look to the industry leaders, and God, IFMA is such an incredible market for that. There's not an industry that is not represented, I don't think, within IFMA somewhere. And if you've not been involved in a council, I highly recommend that you do. All of the clients I work with, that's one of the very first things when we start talking about individual development for them, is find an IFMA council that they can sit in and grow from that, because it really narrows down the field. And you do have to do the same thing when it comes to benchmarking. Look at all the benchmarking sources that are available. There's so many out there. There's some really great partners. And you go to the FM directory, and there will be some benchmarking partners that I would highly recommend that you shop at IFMA first. And then circle back in selecting your KPIs, because external benchmarking is not all about costs, and I alluded to that when I said, it's about processes too. It's about development. It's about evolution. And as we all know, if we don't evolve, we die. We cease to be, we cease to be valuable. So here are some of the benchmarking sources that I would highly recommend that you look at. And many of these are IFMA products and or IFMA partners. For example, FM Benchmarking, very, very strong partner. I've already mentioned APA before. BEX, get involved in BEX. It is probably one of the most underutilized resources that is out there that I would absolutely love for more people to get involved in. It's giving the information in the first place is hard work, and I recognize that, but it seems like a lot more people want the information than are willing to give it. And it is hard. There's no doubt about it. And it is time-consuming, but it is worth it. And then I had to promote my own product of benchmarking, which is FM Diagnostics. But there's a lot of really good folks out there. And I highly recommend that you go out and find one that fits your needs. So what are the benchmarks of benchmarking? Benefits of benchmarking. Well, we've already talked about it. We've talked about, here's one we haven't really talked about. If somebody's looking for going green, getting a green designation, whether that be LEED, whether that be going after your ENERGY STAR certification, that can be a benefit. You can reduce costs, which is always good. That always makes points with the boss. It helps you identify either best practices or better practices, however you want to relate to that. But the bottom line is it adds value. It really does add value to your facilities, and it adds values to the people that are providing, the people that are working on the FM team. It helps them concretely show how they provide value to back to the organization. It also supports business cases for change. It will identify your strengths and your weaknesses. And when I lead people through an analysis or an assessment where they want to know how they're doing, how do I fit against other corporations? What is my score in the capability and maturity model? I say, well, be ready, buckle in, because it could be a rough ride, because improvement is not for the weak of heart. It takes a lot of strength and to understand and to be able to accept and to identify your strengths, but also to look at the weaknesses. It can also help you justify the cost, or help you justify why your practice is what it is. A great example was when I worked at Sprint and I had a fairly substantial subsidized food service. And so the way I validated or I justified that was I worked with a really great company and said, give me some numbers. Tell me what it costs an average company for a worker to leave the premises and to go off site and go to lunch. And let's use something comparable to my site, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the data was overwhelming, that the subsidy was like a fourth of what we were saving in productivity. So that was a really great example of how we justified the cost. It can also help justify energy efficiency improvements, the things that the improvements that you want to make in your within the organization. It also can help you conduct trend analysis, so you can see, are you trending in the right direction or wrong direction, and then what are the things that are impacting that analysis. This is actually a case study where we were trying to identify, they needed a multi-year plan for the correction of existing deficiencies. They had to prioritize the projects. They had to upload some CMMS data. This is what it looked like. And I know everybody's gasping, going, holy schmoly, 2,000 lines of data. But that data was to understand this. What's it going to cost? How much per square foot? What's our FCI? At the end of the day, what we really wanted to understand were what were going to be the annual funding needs. What was it going to cost to keep this campus at the level that they were wishing, and what was their FCI, their Facility Condition Index? What were going to be the expenditures over a 20-year study period? So all of that data helped define what was going to be their expenditure for the next 20 years. So they could take this to their capital planning, take this to the CFO and say, this is what we need and this is why we need it. So bottom line, benchmarking, it's really quite simple. It takes all the numbers collected from big data. It creates a comprehensive and unique story for your organization. And every single one of you, whether you're an FMer or whether you're an FM consultant, every single one of you has a unique story to tell, or you're going to be helping your client tell their own unique story. And this is just a great way of using this type of data to help them tell their story more efficiently. So with that, Josh, I'm going to open it up and see if there's anybody with any questions. If you don't have any questions that you're wanting to talk about publicly or want the whole group, this is my email address, and I can be reached at any time. I'm very responsive to email requests, and I would be more than happy to answer any individual questions that you might have if it's something that you are a little shy about asking on the webinar. And with that, I want to thank you ever so much for the opportunity of being with you and sharing this information, and I'll turn it over to you, Josh.
Great, thank you. I do have a question for you. It's relating back to COBE. It says, do you know of projects to map and migrate legacy facility data into a COBE environment or a COBE model? If so, do these projects deliver value sufficient to justify the time, trouble, and expense involved?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Right?
You know, it would be like saying, does it make sense to BIM an existing facility, or to update CAD drawings on an existing, or to redo all the CAD drawings for an existing facility? It's kind of this. I put it in that same category. I think it's, first of all, how long are you going to own the building? What are you going to do with the data afterwards? And and like I said before in the in the presentation, the expense you have to measure against the outcome and the value of what you're going to get out of that information. What are you going to do with it if you go ahead and do it post construction or post occupancy? I mean, it's like updating, and having a building that's never been commissioned and having it retro commissioned. Is it worth the money? If it impacts the operation and you think it's going to improve, if you think it's going to give you better data to drive the operations and to validate some of the projects that you want, then yes, I would say so. But that's a really loaded question.
Great, thank you. We'll give it just a moment to see if any other questions come in before we wrap it up. And like Teena said, she's a great resource. Feel free, she has her information up there. Feel free to reach out to her. And I don't see anything else coming in. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Teena. I do just want to make everyone aware that World FM Day is coming up June 10th. And the FMCC is putting together a great day-long presentation. I think they're trying to get up to 6 presentations done. And so they'll be taking place throughout the day. More information about that will be coming out. So I just put that on your calendar, everyone, for World FM Day coming June 10th. Next one. And again, as Teena mentioned in her presentation, she linked back to councils, getting involved with councils, etc., and they're a great resource. The FMCC does like to promote the other councils that IFMA does have, and we just list them out here for you so you can be aware. And the final slide, Teena. There we go. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Teena, I want to thank you for doing a great presentation for us. And everyone have a great day ahead.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Take care. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help.